Awesome. Welcome to this week's Substrate Sync. We've got a relatively full agenda today, so we can kick it off. I think, Ben, you're the first item on there.
Yeah. First item on there I wanted to bring up was to do a pulse check to see if everyone is okay with dropping the deprecated URI field from the protos. I know that we had discussed maybe doing some kind of large-scale removal of deprecated features from 1.0 version, but I don't know exactly what the timeline looks like for doing that, and I think we have an opportunity to simplify the protos, and this migration has been going on for 5 months and has been implemented in all of the reasonably maintained libraries. So I think it's safe to drop, but does anyone have any objections?
So there are some libraries like Substrate Validator that are still quite back level. I've got a PR open to bring that up to a more recent version of Substrate. And the other one is the test one. What's that test library called?
Consumer testing?
Consumer testing, yeah, that's it. Again, I started to try and bring that up to date, but it has so many dependencies which fall out of date as well.
Yeah. I mean, when I was doing the migration, it was kind of an open question about what libraries are important to bring through the migration and which ones aren't. And
I suppose, I mean, I don't object, but I suppose my point is that we should probably be looking at these projects and deciding whether we want to just archive them.
I agree. I think that that's reasonable. Like at the current state, it's hard enough to keep a core set up to date. It might be worth saying something like we're going to give it our best effort for some core set of languages, and maybe in the future we explore keeping those up to date as well.
I'm going to add that as an item at the end of the agenda, actually, is like sort of like library support. That could be its own 40-minute discussion. No.
But it sounds like no objections then?
I guess if we figure out how we want to support Substrate Consumer and Substrate Validator, and what's worth doing. I suspect that they would choke on the new plans anyways that we're producing. Because like the newer libraries will probably stop writing URIs anyways, at which point the validator will fail to work.
Well, it did, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for multiple reasons. I mean, there's all sorts of breaking changes that have gone in since it was last updated. But as I say, I've got a PR, if anyone's interested, which does at least bring it up to date, I think, to 0.78.
Okay.
Which, as I say, if anyone, if I think if we decide we're not going to merge that, then we probably ought to decide just to.
No, I've been really interested in having the validator updated. It's the best way when you're writing something new that's creating the protobus to make sure that your code is working. So it's definitely important. I'm glad to see been touching it. I don't have a particular use for it right now because I'm not doing much Substrate right now, but
I think even for that use case, then I think it's still worth getting rid of the deprecated fields, because if the validator can validate plans that nothing else is generating or actively moving away from, then it's a separate thing. We should update it to use the current standard if we want to use it.
So David, would you be interested in reviewing the PR?
Perfect.
And maybe this is a discussion to leave for the end, but maybe it's worth discussing broadly about patterns for getting rid of all of the other deprecated fields too. But yeah, let's table that for now.
Cool. Yeah, that was it for the pulse check. Nullability handling matrix, Ben.
Oof. Yeah. So I have a PR open. I'm not going to say that this PR makes me happy, but I think it reflects a type problem that needs to be resolved somehow, and I can't really figure out an elegant way to do it. I had opened up an issue about this before, but it's basically, to give a simple example, imagine a function which takes in an any1 and returns an any1 with nullability handling mirror, and you pass in an int32 nullable, for example. Does that thing return a nullable int32, or does it return a non-nullable int32? Yeah, here. This is helpful. Thank
yeah,
you.
this there's a whole chart in Ben's like doc where he's clarifying this, where this was expanded from. This seems pretty straightforward to. Okay, what do the nullabilities of lambda functions look like, and stuff like that?
Well, this one isn't even touching the lambda stuff yet. But this first example is a perfectly good example, right? Like, we have this notion of mirror nullability, which means that the arguments, the formal parameters cannot be nullable, right? But then the nullability of the arguments determines the nullability of the output. But then we get into these funky situations like right here, where there becomes this question of how does this nullability handling interact with binding to type arguments? And you can see in this PR all sorts of hairy cases that would need to be accounted for. So
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I guess just action item, just if people could take a look at it, that would be great. But also, if anyone has a nice, elegant solution to this that is more than what I've said, that would be great too.
I think this is coming off the discussion that we had like a month ago, which is the dealing with the nullabilities of like inner types versus outer types, where I think assumption then was like, okay, this should be relatively straightforward to handle. And then we actually start looking at like signatures for like various different types of functions. It gets complicated very fast. So it might be worth revisiting or rethinking about how we want to do this, because anything that requires this many tables is possibly, I mean, it may be the amount of complexity that we need, but it's also very hard to implement. And I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if we need to discuss it right now, because I think trying to get everyone to read the table right now would be a lot, but yeah, we've been looking at nullabilities in nested types, and it's weird. And I guess any immediate thoughts off of that, or any horrifying fears, run for the woods kind of feelings?
Just in case it's let's see, can I share my screen? Where did this go? It might be easier if you just share again. I just wanted to show just one function in particular in that list, which I think most exemplifies
I can share
this
that
problem.
Yes, which one, Ben?
Just the one, I think it's called J. If you go up,
J.
right there. Yeah, the one where there's, you can see it takes in an anyone and a list anyone question mark. Like, how do those things interact? What happens if the anyone pass in is a nullable I32? These kinds of things. Like, I don't think the spec is entirely clear on how to handle those cases. I didn't want you to share necessarily just to say, like, we need to discuss and solve it right now, but just in case the problem wasn't clear, I think that this one hopefully makes the problem clear.
Okay, so now that we've introduced this here, maybe we'll follow up in the Slack, and you can link this example and be like, here's what we're thinking about.
Sure.
But yeah. Yeah. That could also be like another 40-minute discussion, but I think we've got a bunch of other stuff that's possibly a bit more concrete to get over today. And of course, I've lost the agenda. Next up is Nils looking for PMC review for.
I have to throw this joke. I cannot hold it. Who invented null?
Who invented? Oh. I mean, there's a reason why it's the $1 million mistake, but. But yeah, I guess Niels is talking about, I think he had like 3 other PRs that I think Yongchul you'd already approved. I looked at them as well and approved in immersion because they were like documentation fixes. I think the one that he's asking for review for, maybe I'll look at the end, is the adding current date, current timestamp, and current timestamp functions, which I believe he's doing by like adding some session variable concept to the spec, right, Youngshul?
Yes.
So this was the one that we discussed 2 weeks ago. We didn't get a recording, unfortunately. But I think it was. I think what he's implemented here was Jacques' suggestion of having an expression type.
Yes. Yeah. Just yeah. It's basically I mean, it's such a common, frequent things that people request, so it's just easy to have it as a dedicated expression type. That's what he's thinking, and I think it's okay for this one, and really, I mean, these, so I mean, that's it. So maybe we add a few more other stuff, like fairly standard stuff, like user, say user, or principal, or those like common things. We may add that if there's need, but I think just timestamp. We can start with the timestamp. Start small, and then there's a separate axis, and there was a discussion in the past about like basically defining the for the functions, like the how we are evaluating those things. Like, for instance, for current timestamp, for instance, it can be evaluated. I mean, from most the just traditional relational database, those current timestamp is usually captured at the beginning of the query, and then just use it as a constant. Whatever you use current timestamp, it's always the same value, so it remains constant in that way. However, in certain other scope, like stream processing engine, you might want to actually evaluate that current timestamp like every single row. So there's this like evaluation granularity, or let's say more like inline decision. That's another way to put it. So that is a separate dimension that Neil really wants to incorporate that scenario. I think that we can. It can be, yes, it can be, yeah, but still we don't have a clear guidance. So there's another thing that we already have a mechanism called like session dependent, and what does it mean? And okay, so this is session dependent, and then, well, technically, yeah, this like, do you want to evaluate per row or per at various scope or certain functions? Is it cacheable or not? Those are like a separate dimension. It cannot just apply to just generically for the scalar expression, any scalar expression. So I think we need to have something on that dimension, but for just current timestamp that captured the constant, I think this is okay. So I already approved this change. So other PMC, please feel free to review. And
I can try to get to it this week. I think I just missed a discussion from last week, but it sounds like this has come up a number of times. It is a pretty common thing that systems do, so we should have a way to do it, and that seems reasonable.
Correct. Yeah, and also we have a problem that dealing with the no argument function. No argument function. If the no argument functions happens to return always the same value, I mean same type, okay, that's fine. I can work with it. But if the type is parameterized types, for instance, like then like we really don't have a good way to deal with it.
No, we cannot.
Yeah. So that's another thing.
I think we can follow up on PR itself. I've put it in the list of official like PR review requests for the week.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more to say on it, Youngshul, at this point?
I'm sorry?
Oh, do you have anything more to say on it at this point, Youngshul?
No, not for that one.
Yeah. We'll follow up in GitHub.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick item about setting AI policy. I was just thinking that I could, on the website, just put effectively you can use AI. Please review the AI stuff and let us know if you used it and how you used it. Just a general disclosure and disclosure plus, like, hey, you are responsible for anything that you commit or you submit to us, so please check it yourself. Just wanted to check if that was broadly like what people were okay with, and then I could just write it up and put it on there. Cool. Yeah, can do that. I think we've seen a couple. I think I know Ben's been using it for some stuff, and I've used it for a bit of stuff in a couple places, and I've just been like, hey, here's what I used it. I've looked at it, and I think it's just good to have that in writing. Because I know other open source projects are running into issues around like drive-bys, drive-by PRs. Next up is Young Troll, lateral joins.
Yes. So this one, like Victor mentioned, AI. This one is heavily written by AI. I just seeded something, and then well, it looks pretty good. The result looks pretty good. So so this is like, yeah. So David is also working on like along this line with the generator rail. So, and I was I mean, for our interest, for the Microsoft interest, we have this like cross apply, the apply operator that is doing the subquery, the correlated subquery evaluation. So initially I started with the adding a new apply rail. And then once the full draft is out and I squinted, and this is just join. This is just join. So then I scrapped everything and just ended up just adding just Boolean flag that, hey, this join is a retro join, period. And then actually everything just follows nicely. The only difference is the right child, right input can reference the field from the left input. And with some examples of how this reference can be done, I think it's just a extension, like a small change in the protocol, but like it opens up a big expressiveness power in Substrate. So please take a look. I think it's a reasonably clear. I will, as a follow up on this, I'm also opened the issue last night to expand the auto reference related documentations with the examples, like how you calculate the step cells and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Unless could be lateral join, could be used in the lateral join. I mean, lateral join is really just you can access whatever the variables and relations that defined it previously. So they are correlated.
Restricted today. Like there's nothing stopping you from putting a subquery in the. Or I guess you could. This is referencing the output of like the left-hand side somewhere in the right-hand side.
Correct.
There's nothing stopping you from doing that today, right? Like you could put in the right-hand side a subquery reference to the join itself, a field in that join, couldn't you? Wait, no, there wouldn't be a subquery.
No, it's basically, well, at least the documentation is not clear where, I mean, if you steps out one, let's say, like where should I step up?
It's been implemented before, but it is definitely, it's just what up. It's the previous, from your input, right? You go up the input chain to go the steps out, right? For the out of the subqueries.
And I guess the difference was that the subquery expression was effectively the boundary, and that's where the reference came from. But there's no way to mark, like what you're doing here is effectively saying, hey, this join is a subquery boundary effectively. And that way you can say, hey, go back one step, the lateral join true, that is now a subquery boundary effectively, and you can pick
correct
one or the other.
Yeah. So previous subquery is under scalar context. So if you step up, that is basically, yeah, the subquery, the subquery is formulating the boundary. So it's the first relation. And if the inside of the subquery is nested, then it naturally can walk up the tree. So this lateral join will, yeah, introducing that boundary at the join level, so that you can, so right is considered a subquery. So if you just pop up, you can reference the left, and it can be nested. Yeah.
So my problem with this is that we're basically doing an expansion and expecting outer reference to be as if it was expanded instead of it not being expanded, right? Because normally you would, if you are in a join and you want to access the fields on the left side, it's just part of the input, and you don't have any steps out or outer reference.
Correct.
And so this is basically converting a join into something with a subquery, and then expecting you to call it as if it was just something with a subquery.
Yes.
Which really makes it, when you're trying to make it outer reference, clearer. It's now the special case. Oh, because this is actually an expansion.
Yeah.
Yes, you can technically express this as a subquery, like the join can be transformed into a subquery directly.
I mean, yes. I mean, this is like another way to write a join, basically. So, what you can do is you can, if you are rewriting as a join, then the join the join predicate has a true, and the join predicate can be pushed as a explicit filter on the right-hand chart.
Yeah.
And where the right-hand column is unchanged, but the left-hand side column is changed as an outer reference. That will be outer join, inner join, represented as a subquery, represented as subquery. And this is pretty common in if you do the index lookup joins. That's the index lookup join. That is, at least like for me, yeah, it's pretty common pattern.
Okay.
Yeah. So please take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
the other thing is I see this machinery and I'm like, oh, this is vaguely adjacent to dynamic filtering stuff that you need as well if you want to do something like that, or if you want to push down, or if you want to use results from one side to filter optimistically the other side, you sort of vaguely need the ability to reference the output of one of the join shape sides to the input of another.
Yeah. So you could see in that way. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, the join is like logical. I mean, at this level, this is logical. So it just opens up that, okay, with this mode, under this mode, you can have a correlation between left and right. The actual implementation, how you do it,
Gotcha.
can be.
This isn't specific to lateral joins. The general shape of the problem is, in some joins, you need to be able to reference like outer scope variables for corollary joins, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I'll reorder the stuff at the end because.
Yeah. Cool. That was lateral joins.
Sorry, I'm raising my hand. I just wanted to ask one question about this, which is, we are definitely invested in being able to represent unnest operations in plans, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding that this would be a step in the direction, but would not be sufficient yet to represent unnest operations, right? Because you would still need a tool by which you could transform some array into relations. Okay.
So a nest is just converting a scalar into relational.
Yeah.
And so that is it's actually a necessary primitive to make that transition happen. And that's and if you have a nest with this thing, you can express this like more traditional more popular. Like if you're working with a nested data structure with this lateral join, you could express this, okay, I am pivoting the outer things, and then you expand or generating this like repeated field in the sub message. That is possible with the combination with lateral join and the unnest.
I understand.
However, for that particular scenario, this is maybe not the best way to represent this in this way, because it would be very verbose. And so for this, like dealing with the navigating through the nested data structure, maybe better with David's generated rail, which can accept like more high level construct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but this is like basically just generic thing. Like you just arbitrary complex plan, and you just want to have a correlation there.
Yeah, there's a more general problem, which is like the cross-reference stuff. Whether you can use it for a nest. But yeah, I think you could try and use a nest or use lateral join stuff for a nest. I would probably lean away from it, because I think, to Youngcho's point, you can model it like that, but it gets very verbose, and it feels like the concept of a relation that outputs multiple, that expands rows into multiple rows, is relatively common. And then Boshin's telling us, I think he's been deep in the weeds of SQL parser and all that. Oh, I see. Yeah, if you do the there's also like function and nest versus table. From a nest in a project clause versus in a select clause versus a nest in a from clause are different. Cool. Yeah, we can follow up on the join thing specifically in the PR, and then any applications to unnest we can figure it out, or go look at generate rel. Yeah, I guess the next item is a continuation of the discussion that Andrew started, which is about like library support for specifically, I guess, Substrait validator and consumer testing. But I feel like the issue we've run into is that if there's no one actively using it, there's not really any active investment in it. I know, Python has Tornik, Substrait Java has IBM and Datadog. I know Andrew and I are pretty active on there. Rust has been looking at it periodically for some stuff internally. Substrate Go is also us looking at it and trying to hit stuff with, but all the other libraries, I don't know if there's anyone actively using them in a way that forces them to keep up to date. I wonder if it makes sense to flag the ones that we know are actively supported on the website, and then see like who wants to own the other ones effectively.
Yeah, I mean, just having worked on a bunch of these libraries, like each one is its own kind of patchwork covering of the spec in the current state. And I can speak for ourselves at Datadog internally that we, of course, only use a subset of these, and thus are only involved with keeping a subset of them up to date. But I think also in terms of responsibility, it's only realistic to expect that we would keep some subset of them up to date. So I think, considering the fact that Substrate is not at some level of maturity where we can point to any one library and say, this one is really good, you can definitely lean on this one. I think it makes sense to just pick some reasonably small set and say, these are the ones we actually support. But that's just my view. Obviously, I'm biased because those are the ones we need internally.
I might frame it differently in terms of active support. I mean, like, these are the ones that have active users that are like working with them. If you want to use any of the other ones that are interested in like taking charge, we're happy to work with you and like help you get commits and stuff. And like with Substrate Python, Tornik's been doing a bunch of work, and he's kind of like the point person on it. And it's very much like, yeah, like he can own it. He's using it. As far as I'm concerned, if you're using it, you can do not quite what you want with it, but you can improve it the way that you see fit. And I think that the same would hold true for the other repositories like Substrate Ruby and Substrate JS and stuff. So maybe those we should just or I would say maybe we just put on the website, just put, hey, these are the ones that are actively being used by companies. Go ask in these Slack channels for them. And then for the other ones, come if you want to use them and are interested in bringing them up to date, then come talk to us.
I will also say that this is just my own personal philosophical view, but taking Substrate Validator as an example, like I find that one of the things that can be difficult about keeping these libraries up to date is that basically a lot of the problems show up when they're used in production contexts. So for example, Substrate Go we use a lot, and as a consequence, we capture things that are wrong with it all the time, which prompts us to improve it. But as the existence of Substrate Validator was before I was involved in the community, so I don't know what decisions were made there, but I think a lot of the functionality of something like Substrate Validator reasonably could live inside of Substrate RS, which is very load bearing because for us, it handles all of our data fusion plan executions. So,
well, it is,
you know,
but
it's just,
we don't use Substrate already. We only use the protos in data fusion. So
yeah, of course we only use the protos in data fusion, but we also produce bad plans in data fusion all the time. Like my point is the thing that you want out of Substrate Validator, as I understand it, is to be able to say when a plan is good or not. But the thing you want out of the libraries also is to be able to build a good plan. So there's this kind of overlap in intention, except one of them inherently is load bearing because it has to be part of the production system. The other one is a tool on the side, which you hope people use, but doesn't necessarily run on a service in a production workflow. So yeah, I'm not wed to it existing or not existing. I'm just raising the point that I think getting these into the core libraries is a productive way to get them kind of in a robust, mature state.
Sorry, Ben. So when you say good plan, bad plan, these are valid plan and invalid plan, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Valid versus invalid.
When I hear like good plan, bad plan, is basically performance wise.
No. I mean valid
I see.
substrate versus invalid.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I think this Substrate Validator would be incredibly useful if the real interoperability across engine happens. Then it's a really helpful investment. But I don't think we are there yet, I guess.
And even then there's a question where like, okay, if we can get Substrate Validator to a place where we can integrate it with the other libraries, like what would that actually look like in practice in terms of exposing the validation errors, and how much control can you have if your interface is FFI via Rust or via things versus like if each of the libraries had like first class validations themselves. So then we're into issue of like, okay, differences in validations across libraries, but like it's tricky. I don't know if it's one of the weird things where like we could try and bootstrap a centralized library to do all the validations and then embed it everywhere. But we don't necessarily know what kind of validations, what kind of patterns of validations we want until we actually work with the library. So maybe it makes sense to start in the libraries doing validations and then find the set and bring it into a central system. Like it's a bit chicken and the egg. I don't think there's a good pattern. I think we've been adding validations to Substrate Go as we go along, and some in Substrate Java. So it's definitely a hodgepodge of them, but I think that's better than nothing.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of the validations are not so complicated. And let's take like lambdas introduced in Substrate Go, for example. Validations are so much easier to do while you are actually building the substrate, as opposed to taking a plan which is potentially good or not good and then passing that to Substrate Validator through some FFI thing. Like it's not obvious to me that that's going to be an easier approach. So
there's a difference between like a validation that you go on, here's an input plan, check it, versus a validation that you construct while you're building the plan, like the other smart builders that we can start to add in Substrate Go.
Yeah, but we want all of them, I would think, right? I mean, that's what a builder should be, I think, in a library, a thing which helps you make correct substrate.
Yeah.
I guess getting back to the general, I mean, I think what I'm going to propose is I'll write up another thing for the website, which is like, hey, here are the language libraries that are actively in use and the places where you can talk to people using them. Here are the ones that may require adoption. And if you're looking to use it and own it, we're happy to work with you. And it still leaves like Substrate Validator as like, I think David's taking a look at it. So actually, if that gets updated, then we can say, okay, this is under semi-active development.
Andrew said he'd take a look at it, I think, actually.
I think David was going to review Andrew's PR.
Yeah, I've got a PR, but it's been open for quite a while.
Okay.
Cool. And then it also leaves like consumer testing as well. How do you want to deal with that?
Yeah, and I took a stab at that, but it had other dependencies which I tried to bring up to date. So there was There was the IBIS library, which is owned by a different org. And again, I submitted a PR months ago, really, and it's nobody's looked at it. And so you know that if we can't get that updated, then we've got to look at re-engineering consumer testing to eliminate that dependency. And it also depends on DuckDB extension, which I did get updated, and it depends on Substrate validator. It's so fragile that I think going forward, I mean, and the updates I've put in are already out of date because Substrate Protos has moved on since then. I think to your point, Ben, if it's not used in a production system, there's no motivation to keep it bang up to date.
Yeah, and I don't think, it hasn't really been updated in a while. I know that internally we've taken a different tact onto trying to do something like Substrate consumer for our systems, where I think coupling the execution of the test to the thing generating the test is a bit tricky, because to your point, Andy, you run into the issue of when my downstream's out of date, I have to update the downstream before I can update my test framework, where we're thinking about like a framework in which we split the generation of all of the tests to make a bunch of vectors, and then we would integrate those directly into consumers that we care about, if that makes sense. So the tests can be run like against data fusion, against like our internal systems consuming Substrate, against IBIS, but they're not. It's like from their perspective, it's like here's a bunch of plans of expectations that you run like in a more SQL logic style. Like, does that make sense? Where the execution is not in Substrate as much as in the systems that are integrating with Substrate.
My original motivation for updating consumer testing was because I wanted to put the Spark mappings into it to see, to extend the matrix with Spark, but I think I've got to the point where it's just, it's diminishing returns.
No, and I like the idea behind consumer testing. I think it's useful, but I definitely sometimes look at that blob of Python code and my eyes just like glaze over.
I just wanted to say that we actually were using Substrate Validator at some point in production in our systems, but because the Substrate received by Substrate Validator was the last node in the system, what actually happened was because the other nodes were producing incorrect Substrate for whatever reason, it just became an extremely noisy signal of just, warning, invalid Substrate, warning, invalid Substrate. And I was not involved with that decision, but they ultimately removed it because they were just like, well, it's the Substrate that works for us, which again, just I think further shows the point, like the library should be producing correct Substrate. Yeah,
that always fixes the errors, doesn't it? Is to
exactly.
Just correct by default. I think that, I'll write something up for at least the core language library. So I think we can say that Substrate Validator is experimental in some development, and maybe consumer testing is like has no ownership right now. And just be upfront where that's the case. We do have some other stuff, I guess, Ben, deprecating fields generally.
I think that item jumped somehow above Young Chol's 2 items. If you want to go first, I don't know how that happened. I'm not a line skipper,
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah.
I mean, what I'll say is, I think, are there any objections? Like, I think there was what talk about doing a big bang to remove everything once at pre 1.0, but we don't know when that's going to happen, and I don't think it hurts to, the URI stuff's been around for 5 months now. Like, let's get rid of it to reduce complexity. Same with a couple other fields where like, hey, this has been live across like the major libraries we care about. And maybe that's what we can say. It's like, hey, these are the libraries that are actively being worked on and are being migrated actively. So if you use these libraries and we're doing migrations, you will get like safe jumps. And if you're not using them, then your stuff may like blow up randomly if no one's taking care of it. But I think that, Ben, the point that you were going to make was, do we need to wait to 1.0 to remove stuff, or can we just do it? I think we can just do it. I don't think anyone's objected to that generally.
Well, I mean, ideally, if Substrate validator is very well maintained, then it has been throwing deprecation warning as a validator output for 5 months, and then but like I think it's I think it's fine.
I think that managing multiple migrations potentially at once in all of these different libraries actually adds a pretty insane level of complexity across all of them.
Yeah.
And if we don't take the approach of finishing these migrations, then we just kind of keep this complexity going. The complexity, which is always like libraries receive a plan with one of these fields, but they always try to admit two, but sometimes admitting both the new field and the old field is impossible. Which it is.
So one second. So I mean, I know protobuf of C++, but the others I don't know. So if you try to use the deprecated field, for instance, like protobuf Go, what do you get? Do you get like any
Substrate Go or
Substrate Go, let's say? So because like in C++, if you're trying to use a deprecated field, it will generate a compiler warning. And if you have, so you basically specifically suppress that compiler warning.
I guess if you're writing the protobuf directly using the protobufs, then yeah, I guess you would probably be exposed to this warning. If you're writing it via the libraries that are generating the protobuf for you, then probably we're handling the deprecations. But also we're doing the migrations at the library level. So like we're guaranteeing that, hey, we're removing this field, but all the libraries that in that ecosystem of like Rust, Python, Java, and Go know how to read both fields. We're getting rid of the old one and we just get rid of it entirely. So I guess at the language level, we can guarantee them, or we're handling the migration. And then, yeah, if you're doing the protobuf yourself, that's where it gets like, okay, you have to check to make sure that you're handling it correctly.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that maybe would have been a nice thing to include in these libraries, though, if you received a plan that contained a deprecated field to somehow report
That's
that.
where perfect place to
We can add it to the feature.
deprecation warning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing I'll say is I think it's probably good to get rid of stuff actively rather than wait, because either we do a bunch of small migrations or we end up doing one mega migration as part of the like pre 1.0 to 1.0 jump, which becomes.
Yeah. I mean, for now I'm thinking about it. Like, I mean, if someone actually shout, that's actually a good thing for us.
No, that's the other thing. Like we're re-releasing. I assume when people down, like use the new version of the library, like please deploy it to staging and not directly to prod. And if we blow up your staging, you can come talk to us. If you blow up your prod, I might be like, why don't you have a staging environment? But
yeah. So yeah. I mean,
but yeah, it sounds like no one's against deleting stuff. So let's delete more. I mean, Niels has been on a roll deleting old things that are under spec, like the capability stuff and all that. And I'm like, you know what? I want to have less. The less we have, the easier 1.0 is. I want fewer features.
Yeah.
Young Schultz, sharing relations and expression.
Yeah.
Water.
So these things. So now I'm. So we are in a process of basically embracing Substrate in my product org, and we are like doing with like really crazy plans. So for us, basically declaring Substrate, the message itself, is a big portion of the effort. So that's why I propose the type alias and all these things. And now it's sharing like common sub-expression, the relation, and also the scalar expressions. And as you saw the lateral join, I'm just looking at everything with the correlated things. So basically sharing relation, we have reference rel, which only works without like correlation. Like if you don't have like auto-reference, you're good. You can use the reference rel.
Just a quick question. When you say sharing relations, I assume you're talking about like sharing the relation within a single plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. For a second, I was like, oh, you want to share relations externally to other
No.
Cool.
Within the Substrate message, within the Substrate plan message, I want to reference like this common relation tree, rel tree in various places. So because that's a model of like reusing the spool, modeling spool. So yeah, but with correlation, so if that's shared expression had autoreference, then suddenly it doesn't work today, because wherever you plug it in, very much likely your basically the depths or the field reference can change. So somehow we need to express basically, okay, this expression to use this like thing, if it happens to have this like autoreference, you need to basically plug in the right context. When
It's like you have like one tree that has a shared, like that references this relation, but this relation references a subquery or a field that's not in that subtree, but in like the parent one.
correct, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That makes sense, but also
yeah. So in SQL Server, like everything is name based. So we don't have this problem because I mean you have A and B. Okay, this A and B is unique in this plan, so there's no, you can just plug it in like arbitrarily. And now we are trying to convert the thing using Substrate, and okay, like this A and B is it may be on one case it's depth 2 and 3, field 0, 1, but the other case the depth is different, field is different. So so there's that basically that's the context. So I don't know, like, so my initial thinking is introducing some sort of like binding to the plan rel. So optional binding declaration, and then and also adding optional binding to the reference rel, so that if this tree has this like outer references somehow, well, we actually need to either somehow need to deal with these outer references. So somehow so
like you need a mechanism to reference outer references across like reference, like ref rel boundaries effectively.
correct, yeah.
Again, what does the logic of that look like? And you're saying
Yes.
you run into issues where you have the common tree where like, oh, this might be like this outer reference is 2 out, but in some trees you want it to be 1 out, and in some trees you want it to be 2 out for like the same ref rel.
Correct, yeah. But that's not it is actually per outer reference, because you can, if it is in the nested context, like one is actually like 3 level above, the other one is like 2 level above, so you need to wire these things correctly. So that's something that you will see soon. So this just a heads up.
I will say, when you do that, you should include examples, because this definitely hurts.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There's also a part of my brain that's like, don't do this. There's a little bit of it's like, don't structure your trees like. No, the reference, including the references makes sense, like in like the subtrees. But yeah, the resolution across boundaries is interesting.
Yeah. So it is, I mean, the most like least intrusive way would be, everything is intrusive at this point, but either model it as a table function, essentially inline table function, and then you provide this binding. So that will be, the outer reference will be replaced to some other things. That's one way. Another way is like adding this like remapping area, remapping. So yeah, the outer reference under this tree 3.1 is actually in this scope. No, ignore that. Use this one instead. Like something like that. You'll see. I'll make a proposal.
Yeah, I think this will work. This will go better in GitHub with.
Yeah.
And then finally, a really easy topic to finish off: collations. I feel like this came up. I also saw this when you were talking with Ben about adding like array sort or list sort as a function, as a list function, where it's like, okay, cool. Wait, how do we define collations? And it's like, well, we don't actually do that for sort relations either right now. And I'm like, oh wait, oh no.
Yeah.
So,
So So yeah, this is coming with the help of the AI. I'm trying to embrace it, and for Substrate project, this is like really good. That's what I found. It's just incredibly boosts my productivity.
It is generally useful for like doing literature searches where it's just like, hey, you have downloaded the docs for every engine that I could care about. Probably like, is this function exist in these engines? Please let me know.
The interaction with this like Retro join PR is amazing. Like it just reads my mind. Yeah, so I, for the collations, so I, in one of the I forgot his name. So there's a pending PR adding this unsigned numeric.
Oh, Caden, an unsigned numeric, yes.
And there, I think I left the comments. Yeah, I mean, why don't we just include the type declaration and all the related functions in the same YAML file so that it's a self-contained?
Yeah.
I try to explore that space with the collated string, and it's not easy. It's not easy.
I think that's an interesting point where like right now we've grouped functions based on like their capabilities roughly. So we have like functions arithmetic, which is like all the arithmetic functions. Or maybe a better grouping would be to group the functions by the types they operate on. But it's weird.
Yeah, I think a core is fine, but if you're defining a basically extension type, then it is, I think that's really tripped me off. Like, okay, this is extension type, but why this is appear in the core? So that's where I think there's separation. If you're extension type, then I think it's better to be either self-contained or in a separate namespace. Once it promote the call type, then we can integrate it. I think that's the thing. But for collation, because of nature, that the collation is not like just, unfortunately, it's not just it's a type, but it has a complex fields in it. It is not just type. It has a fields in it. Like you have like because you can override the collation definition. That is another thing. It is just not like ENUS. You can customize. Okay, based on ENUS, you add like these custom rules and so on. So the collation itself is a complex data structure, and it has to appear as a type. Yes, Ben.
So I know significantly less about collations than anyone here, but I'm confused why it has to be its own type. Like I thought collation was sort of a way to define string comparison and promotion and these sorts of things.
No, sorry, type arguments.
Yes. Okay.
Arguments.
Well, type arguments, or I guess I would have thought it's function
parameterized by its collation.
Yeah, string types are. I mean, ideally, string types needs to be parameterized with the collation.
I guess by default you use like whatever the default en.us is everywhere, not everywhere, but
or whatever system default, like whatever. Yeah. So that's practically today.
I guess I would have expected that the type or that the arguments would be part of the functions rather than string itself.
You could include it as an option for every function that would require a collation for either comparison or for upper or lower casing.
The problem is you cannot, I mean, in theory, you cannot compare strings on different collations.
Well, yes, but if you had a compare function, which was variadic, and the compare function itself took in, option arguments that determine the collation string.
Then basically you need to track, like for every, so okay, you need to remember this string. That this string is actually collation X. So
the issue is you might store in the same table like two columns of strings with different collations, and then when you compare them, like in a substrate type system, they just look like strings. But when you actually try to run it, you actually have to keep track of it to know, these are different collations.
Exactly. Yeah.
And can you coerce between collations? Can you coerce between like collations? Is that a thing?
No, no.
Okay, yeah, that's
you can explicitly collate one string to another specific collation, and there's like this conversion going on. But like you cannot compare different collation strings in different collations. So you need to, for the string operations, you need to keep track of, okay, this thing is on collation X, and you need to keep track of this information. So do you want
they also
to
display differently.
remember that externally or
displayed?
Huh?
Would collation affect how strings are displayed in outputs as well?
collation?
Would collations affect how strings are displayed in like outputs?
Displayed,
Or like shown to the user, I guess.
shown to the user. I don't know. Strings.
I guess I'm thinking like, yeah, if you have a project that or a table scanner returns 2 columns or like the strings are different collations, like even with no functions involved, that may behave differently. Like would the consuming system need to know that, oh, these things have different collations, I might want to output them differently. But also I think we are at time. So we can
Yeah,
talk about collations for hours.
Yeah, it may yeah, collation is all about ordering.
Okay.
So for display, I think it's a more like maybe vision of locale.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we are at time, so I'll say thanks everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Everyone.